Well, expectations, as you say, weren't as high on the Bombers in the pre-season. Some had them making finals, others had them around the mark, and you might have had them a bit lower. But all the good faith from that round one effort against the Hawks seems to have gone out the door with that 61-point loss to Adelaide, where they gave up 161 points. Your overarching thoughts as a rusted on Dons man?
Disgraceful. Look, there's two stories here. One is, and this column I've written for ESPN, I've looked at the bigger picture view, but I'm afraid there is two stories. One is the immediate, quality of a list, coaching sort of argument, but that to me is only a small part of the bigger story, which is the malaise with the players. The fact that this playing group can be good one week and then get blown away the next in round two, mind you. It's a weak club. This Essendon is a weak football club. They've been weak in the playing group for a long time, but the culture is weak. The standards are weak. And I think this group running the club now is aware of that and is doing everything in its power to change it. But the neglect has been so profound for so long now, and we're talking about almost 25 years, that it will take years and years to get to a point where the right standards and examples are being set. Now, that all might sound a bit namby-pamby to people, but I'm telling you, the end result of that is defenders who are playing off their man, is midfielders who aren't running back hard enough defensively, is players who get a little bit down and then throw in the towel. These are and some of the more senior Essendon players are some of the worst exponents of this. Andy McGrath, who's a vice captain, some of his defensive efforts were appalling. He's a turnover merchant. He's a panic merchant. And I think, the fans are getting very sick of hearing these same guys talk the talk every week and not walking the walk. Ben Mackay, obviously a lot of fingers being pointed at him, but that's working out badly. Another thing, two things for me stand out at the moment. One is that you lose a key defender in Ridley, and that's enough to destabilise the whole back line. You lose an important forward in Kyle Langford, and the whole forward structure looks totally impotent. The other one is the number of players who are being played not in the positions they were recruited to play. So you've got Shield playing as a half-back.
Yep.
You've got a ruckman in Draper playing as a de facto key forward. There's a third one there I'm desperately trying to remember at the moment.
Harry Jones on a wing.
Harry Jones on a wing. And Harry Jones, to me, is symptomatic of the deficiencies in recruiting and player development. And, if you want to be really forensic about it, go through. They've had, I think it was 6 first-round picks playing in that side on Saturday, and they're all vanilla. Jones was a pick 30, but Sartis, Hobbs, the 3 busts out of the 2020 draft, Cox, Reid, Perkins. This is a very untalented playing group. There's one star in the whole group, and that's Zach Merritt. Worse than that, you go back to since 2000, I would argue Essendon has recruited 2 players who have become champions. One of them is Zach Merritt, and the other one is Jobe Watson, who was a father-son they had priority access to anyway. It's been absolutely dismal. And yes, Adrian Dodoro has to wear a lot of the responsibility for that, but so do the people doing development, so do the administrators who appointed those guys to the development group or the football department. And this gets back to my bigger picture thing, that the whole club has made a series of poor decisions, of which the poorest obviously was the decision to use supplements. But a series of poor decisions have almost turned the club belly up, and I think it'll take years still until they're at a level that other clubs take for granted.
So it's interesting, obviously comes from a place of passion and obviously, you
a longer-term lens.
Yeah, but I looked at it, a lot of things you're saying sort of ring true in terms of the numbers that I've written down. So one of the stats that sort of come across my desk this morning is Brad Scott, 12 years he's been a coach. So he coached North Melbourne for all those years and now at Essendon. None of those years has he finished top 6 for points against. So top 6 for points against, you've got to be in top 6 to win a premiership. He's never been there in the 12 years of coaching.
We talk about premiership metrics. We talked about them a lot on the podcast last year and the year before. We'll probably talk about them as finals approach a bit more on this pod as well. But you've got to be top 6 defensively. Yeah. And he's never had a team that's done that.
Yeah, correct. So that comes back to, so he's never been a defensive coach, but the team that he took over, so you look at going back to 2016, so Worsfold had him from 2016 to 2020. the Bombers were 15th for points against, 16th for points against from turnover, and 16th for defending ball movement from the back half. Rutten takes over for a couple of years. They go to 14th for points against, 15th for points against from turnover, and 17th for defending the ball from the defensive half. And now Scott's taken over. They've been 15th for points against, 15th for points against from turnover, and 15th for defending ball movement from defensive half. So 3 identical profiles with 3 totally different coaches that would all be coming in and seeing the same profile and thinking, this is the side of the ball we need to be fixed. For, what's that? It's almost reaching 10 years now and it's sort of been an issue. So listening to you sort of saying how it might be a mindset of the club and things like that, it's really interesting to me because it's like, well, no one out of any of these coaches, no one has actually been able to sort of get them into out of the top, out of the bottom 4, really.
And this is my point, that the leaders, the guys who pass for leaders at that club, none of them have really played with successful teams. So they're not sure, even with their best intentions, they're not sure of the level of work and commitment which is actually required.
You talk about sort of the last 25 years, going back as far as you want, but more contemporary times. When you look at this year in isolation, I know it is a small sample size, but are there signs that are very worrying for Essendon fans?
Oh, definitely. So talk about effort against Hawthorn, and it was great, but still finished that round in the bottom 5 of a lot of sort of defensive measures, which is, all the rankings sort of dropped to last after the Crows game. So points against, they've given up the most of anyone this year. They've been the easiest team to score against once inside 50. They conceded the most points from turnovers, which 109 of those were on the weekend against the Crows, which is Adelaide's, I think, equal 4th most in any game that they've recorded. Just look at every single chain and how often that leads to a score. Essendon are 18th for defending kick-ins, clearances, intercepts, so put them all together. They're 18th. The one for me, again, Adelaide put such a big score on them that it's going to sort of blow these numbers out. But they're 17th for points conceded from forward half chains and 18th for points conceded from back half chains. So they're getting beaten by being bogged down in their back half and conceding scores, but they're also getting scored against from the transition. So
the one that here that sticks out to me is they're 18th, so worse in the competition for pressure applied.
Yeah, so
that's not having the ball for.
Yeah, that's just so this is more of a team setup thing. Not being able to defend inside 50 entries. It's probably 6 or 7 defenders that's on. Pressure acts is just getting to the guy with the ball. Just get into his face, get a hand on him or something to get your pressure applied up. They're 18th for that, so they're not putting any pressure on the ball carrier, and their structure behind the ball is clearly not stacking up either.
All I'd say about Brad Scott is, and the natives are getting restless, and they're beginning to follow the same pattern, which is the coach cops it. And this is why I'm sort of, as a Essendon person, I'm desperate for the Essendon fan base to see that these issues are so endemic that in a way the coaches are relevant. I'm not saying he's irrelevant, but you could have Jock McHale coaching this group at the moment and the same things would be happening. And Brad Scott, I think, can be a really good coach for Essendon away from the ground almost, in setting the standards around the club and around training. And my mail is that these things are in fact happening and those attitudes are turning around. But it's a slow burn, and it's going to take future generations of players who deliver on these newly set up standards. We're not going to see it with this playing group.
To use your logic against you, Rohan, we're only 2 games into the season and maybe things can turn around, but we'll keep a close eye on the Bombers, that's for sure, going forward.